We are up to Daf Mem Tes Amid Aleph. We're going through these different questions. A whole series of questions that Papa was asking regarding Chafina, the scooping of the taters by the Kohen Gadol, and also some questions regarding Kaimitz. So we're up to here. Boyid Papa, 10 lines from the top of the page, continuing with his questions. Boy, Papa had a question. So that Memtes Amar Aleph, about 10 lines from the top. Boy, Papa had a question. What about Chafan Chaveidoi? So what happens? The Kohen Gadol is supposed to go and take the Titus himself and and then put it into the ladle. Right? He takes the Titus and he takes a scoopful, 2 hands, puts it in the ladle, and then the ladle, he takes it and he brings it to Kodesh Kedoshim, and then we had 2 opinions whether he puts it he takes his hand again, and then he puts it on top of the coal, or he'll go directly from the ladle and he puts it on top of the coal. So the question now is, what about if the Kohen Gadol himself did not put his 2 hands and scoop out the Torah, but rather his friend picked it up and placed it in his hand? Mao, how do we view that? It says in the pasuk that he should take a shovel full of coal, right, from the fire in his bech, and then it says he should take a malay chafnaf, there's 2 handfuls of potato samim and bring it in. So the question is as follows. So Ma'azadin, do we say malay chafna be'inan va'ika is supposed to be 2 handfuls and he took it? Dilmo, maybe the word velokach, which is the beginning of the pasuk, which talks about the coal, maybe the velokach also refers to the second half of the pasuk when it talks about the Torahs, and in both cases, velokach, he has to be the one to take it, not just to bring it. Velokach, vehevi bina, v'haleka, he didn't take it, so another coin took it, take it. So it's questionable if the word velokach refers to the second half of the pasuk as well or not. Now we have a question of Levi, we should continue for a while. What about Chafan? What about in the case where, let's say, Chafan, the Kohen, took the Keteris, but then the mace, he passed away. And the question is, another Kohen Gadol steps in, obviously. Does he continue, or he has to start all over again? Can somebody else, another Kohen, take over and continue the work with the original Chafina of the first Kohen? With the first Kohen or not? Says the Gemara.
Wouldn't that original chafina be tomei because it was being held in the hand of a dead person?
No. Obviously, it's tomei. It wasn't betamid. So what happens is they put it in a ladle, right? The first Kohen Gadol took the potatoes, placed it in a ladle, and then I guess he died before he was betamid, and somebody else. The other guy, can he just take the ladle and continue with it, or does he have to start again from scratch or not? That's the question. Says the Gemara. So, somebody has come in and take over or not?
Can't you ask this any one of the avoiders? One coin starts and then he dies, and the other coin.
Yeah, but certain. Well, we know we talked about it a lot of times. If a carbon is in the middle of a mace, it's like a chata shemesu, it's finished. But over here, is this considered part of, because you have to do 2? If you hold, you have to do 2 scoops. Right? If we hold out a coin, we're talking about if you hold out a coin, God has to do 2 scoops. One's initially put in the ladle, and then when you bring the ladle to Kodesh Kedoshim, it does another scoop. So the second coin will be doing the mitzvah of the scoop. So is that good enough, or does he have to do 2 scoops? As we'll see. If he only does 1 scoop and then he just puts it over the coal, then we have a problem. The second Kohen Gadol did not do Malay Chafnaf. And the Torah says clearly the Kohen Gadol does Malay Chafnaf. We're talking about if you hold like the view that you have to do 2 fistfuls twice. Is it good enough for the second one or not? Says the Gemara. So that's most question. Rav Chanina says, "Boy Yurei." Rav Chanina comment, and he said, "Boy Yurei, come and see Shailas Harishonim." He said, "Come and see the Shaila of the Rishonim." Come and see, he said, that the people initially who asked questions, we ask the same questions today as well. That the later generations, are just as smart as the early generations, because I had the same question as Mishum Alevi. Says the Gemara, are you telling me that you're considered the later generations of Shmuel Levi, the early generations? Remember that Shmuel Levi, Kashi, Shmuel Levi is older. But Shmuel Levi once made a comment, nothing to do with this, but he said, Li hitit Rab Chanina. Rab Chanina was paskin for me, and he said, I'm allowed to, and he called him Rebbe Chanina. There's no way that Shmuel Levi would have referred to Rab Chanina. First of all, we don't ask him a shayla, so he wouldn't call him Rebbe if he was much later generation. So obviously, not only within the same generation, but Rishon Levi looked up to Rabbi Chanina, called him Rebbe, asked him a shayla. So how could he make a comment and say, look how we, the later generations, are just as smart as Rishon Levi, the early generations? What was the case there? So we're going to digress for a minute. You allow me to drink cress on Shabbos, says Gemara, because it's therapeutic, but I was just drinking it. Normally, I'll take medicine on Shabbos because you're going to crush the medicine, grind the medicine, but drinking it as normal food, you're allowed to. Says Gemara, just drink pshita. I need Rab Chanina to tell me that. Now we learned clearly in the Mishnah in Shabbos, we learned that any kind of food, we learned that any kind of food a person can eat, even though it's therapeutic. Any drink shows you can drink. So what's the chiddush? Ella, he allowed me He allowed me not only to drink, but he actually allowed me to grind it. He allowed me to grind it. Says the Gemara, hey, what are you talking about? If it's a master constafashes, mishra shari, you're allowed, you have to. And what's the chiddush? And we eat the lekka sakanta, there's no constafashes, meser also is taka forbidden. How in the world did he allow him to go and grind? We're talking about that there is a sakana. If no, it is a sakana. So what's the chiddush? Rabbi Chanina allowed him to grind and drink this cress. But this is the question. My question to him was not so much the halacha, but more about the therapeutic side. Me, Masya, does it taka heal? Is this like a voodoo stuff, or this is real? Does this taka heal? The nechel Shabbat I should be mechal Shabbos, and I'm allowed to. Olay Masya doesn't really heal at all. But the nechel Shabbat I shouldn't be mechal Shabbos. So we see clearly from here. So first of all, why did I ask Rabbi Chanina? Because the Baki b'lefuas Rabbi Chanina was also a doctor. Besides being a maida and a big time of Chacham, he was also a Baki b'lefuas. He knew b'lefuas. The Amar Rabbi Chanina once said, how do we know that he knew things about medicine? Because we had more chulin, the terrible thing about a white donkey. How if it causes somebody, inflicts somebody damage, it's very painful, and it's you can't even, it's harmful, and you can't even cure it. So he once said, nobody ever asked me a question about if they were affected or they were hurt by a white donkey, and they managed to survive it. In other words, you don't survive. They would ask Rabbi Chanina. What does that clearly show? Rabbi Chanina was actually a big doctor. That people get hurt by a white donkey, and yet a mule, and yet they survive. Ema say is that they were able to be cured completely. They were able to be, but that doesn't happen. Remember, we see clearly the mitzvah that they do get healed. Says we're talking about a red donkey. They were red, but the tips of their feet were white. Those are the ones that are, even though you might survive, but it's incurable. It will always remain some debilitating effect. But what is even all this? Chanina was in medicine. But what are we saying? Why are we bringing all this down? The Shurma Labor referred to Chanina as a Rebbe Chanina. The Kamoka Shmamina from here, see the Chanina was older than Rabbi Shurma Levi. In fact, he said exactly the opposite. Sha'alton kishi'ila shel rishonim. Shurma Levi, who was younger than Chanina, his question was, he was brilliant because he asked the same question like the rishonim. My question, I asked the same thing. If a kohen gadol did the chafina and then he died, can another kohen take off where he left off? Says the Gemara, but the whole thing doesn't make sense. Or me, Rabbi Chanina even asked this question. We know for a fact that Rabbi Chanina could never have asked this question because it's against his whole shitta. How was that? Because Rabbi Chanina once said, it says in Pasuk that Aaron HaKohen said the Zeis Yaveh Aaron HaKohen. This is how Aaron HaKohen goes into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. He goes in with a par. He goes in with a par ben bakal lechatos. He goes in with an ox, and it says bepar. So the question is, does it have to be a living par when he does the Torah? Does it have to be a living par, or just talking about bringing in the blood of the par? Because the Torah refers to it not as dama par, but bepar. What does par mean? Rabbi Chanina holds bepar v'loi b'domei shel par. Rabbi Chanina holds when it says that bepar, that means if he shechted the par and he died, another kohen takes over, that kohen has to bring a new par all over again. If you hold bedomishal par, and let's say the kohen gadol shechted the par, and then he died, it's no problem. The main thing b'zois kohen is the dam, and the new kohen will bring the dam. So he's bringing the dam of the par. But if you learn the par means literally the par itself, well, the second kohen didn't have a par. So the first kohen's par. He has to start all over again. So it's a problem. The problem is as follows. So first of all, he says, Chanina says, he holds, as we'll see later, the Gemara, bepar, v'loy bedomish a par. He holds that it's a par and not the blood of a par. That's number one. So what's the problem? The problem is because Chanina also said that later on, that Ktoidis, shechofna, koidem, shchitas a par, l'asloikum. That if you, so since the new kohen is going to have, if the kohen died after shchit of a par, the new kohen has to shech the par again. If the new kohen shech the par again, he has to bring the ktoidus, start the ktoidus process all over again, because the shchit of the par has to be done before the chafina, the scooping for the ktoidus. If you reverse the order, it's la'asav le'klum. So therefore, how can you have a shaila if the kohen died after the chafina? Can the next kohen take over? Since he didn't bring in since he has to go into the kohen roshim, he has to bring a new par. Once he has to bring a new par, anyway, he has to bring a new chafina. So what's the shaila of chaf of a mace if the other guy can take over? Of course he can't. So the Gemara, so in fact, now we're twisting around his words completely. It didn't mean that he was Achronim, he meant he was a Rishonim. But he wasn't saying that, Shmuel Levi is so smart that he's as smart as me. That would sound a little bit arrogant. He's saying he's as smart as the people in my generation, not like me, because I, in fact, don't have this question. He says, the fact that Shmuel Levi asked this question, can the Kohen Gadol take over the Chafina? Which means he definitely doesn't have to shecht again the par, which means he holds that par doesn't mean par, par means the blood of the par, which is still available. He hasn't brought it in yet, he'll do it soon. Because of the par, par. He means even the blood of the par. So therefore, he holds, like all my contemporaries who argue with me, that it's the blood of the par. So Rabbi Shmuel Levi is smart, equal to people are older than him, but to my contemporaries. So he wasn't being arrogant at all. He was saying forget about everybody else. This is similar to what everybody says. Rabbi Yosef says in the end of Gemara Saita, when they were talking about when this person died, Yerchet stopped, and this person died, that stopped, the Hashanim stopped. And Rabbi Yosef says, what about Anova? When it comes to humility, like Tisna Anova Dikana. Don't say it stopped back then because you forgot about me. I'm an Anov. And everybody's perplexed. How can Rabbi Yosef go around saying he's an Anov? And by blasting from the, on the top of the building, I am an Anov. So the pshat, according to one pshat of the very nice pshat is, Rabbi Yosef was a Rosh Hashiva. After Rabbi passed away, they made a Rosh Hashiva. He felt that he didn't deserve it. He felt there were so many other people, contemporaries, colleagues, who exceeded him in learning and so on, and they were more capable. They should have been a Rosh Hashiva. Navas, everybody else was such an Anav, they didn't want to take the job, so it was left to him. So Rabbi Yosef said, like Tisna Anava, Dika no, don't learn Anava because it's me. He meant not me personally, me, my situation. In my situation, you can see there were so many rabbis who were humble and they refused to take on the job of Rosh Hashiva, and they left it for me because they were the ones who were humble. So the same thing with Rabbi Chanina. When he was saying that, look how Rabbi Shmuel Levi was so smart, clever, that he asked the question of the Rishonim, not himself, but all of his peers. Says the Gemara, and according to what we thought, that his question was like the first ones was of Chanina, my Havi Allah, what's taka? Yeah. Sorry, so that's what he meant to say. That's what he meant. That all my peers and everything else. Okay, says Gemara now good. Bottom line, my Havi Allah. Let's get back to the real question. So you focused on a comment that Chanina made, but let's get back to the Shaila. The Shaila was what happens was a Chafina and the Kohen Gadol died, passed away, and the new Kohen Gadol took over. What happens then? Does he resume the Aveda or does he start again? Amar Papa says like this: If the din is that you do twice Chanina, that you do twice Chayfin. Remember, we had a question before which we never resolved. But if we say that Bachfina, that the Kohen does one Chafina, puts in the ladle, and then brings the ladle inside, and then takes it both hands, and then he puts it on top of the comb, then Chaveda Nichim Chafinos. that I would argue that if the first Kohen Gadol did the first chafina, then he passed away. The second Kohen Gadol comes and does the second chafina, is all right. The fact is he did a chafina. Malay chafna, if he did it. But he ain't chayfin b'chayze b'chayfin. But if you tell me that a Kohen Gadol does only one chafina, he goes out and takes the ketayis. They bring the ketayis from Beis Hab, a shovel from Beis Habtinis, and he takes his hands and scoops it out. And then he goes in and then he puts in the ladle. And the ladle, when he walks in Kodesh Kodashim, he just take the ladle and he pours it on top of the coal. If that's what he does, then the Kohen Gadol has to start again. But he ain't chayv the boilach. Then it's a good question. Well, at least that's one of your questions. Amalei, that wouldn't be Yeshua, his friend of Rab Papa. Yeshua said, Papa, I would argue exactly the opposite. What? And I say as follows: Eat chayfin v'chayse. If the din is and you have to repeat it twice, then definitely the second kohen cannot do it. Cannot continue. Why? Because we learned before that it has to be exact measurement malay chafnaf of your hand, not greater, not smaller. Depends on the size. No two kohen gedolim can have the exact same size hands. So therefore, the second kohen cannot continue. If he has to do a second chafina, it won't be the same as the first chafina. It'll be a little bit excess, a little bit under. So it's no good. Should not enter. It's impossible that I won't be missing, or it won't be extra. But if the law is that you do one chafin and that's it, then you have a valid question. So what should the din be? Should the new kohen start again or not? So the Gemara, so the Gemara says, what's the story? We actually, so this is what we referred to a couple of days ago, that we had a question. The boilu, we asked the question, do we do twice or not? Toshma, so come in here, says the Gemara. So now we're focusing back on this question of chayfin v'chayze v'chayfin. What do you do twice or not? Toshma, come in here. It says not Mishnah. This was an extra word. It says this was the measure. My lab, what do you mean the measure? Just like the measure was on the outside when he took it from the shovel, so too when he went inside, he also had to have the same amount. So you see that clearly. What do you mean kach midas? Sounds like he has to do it a second time, and it has to be exactly the same. So it's that chayfin v'chayze v'chayfin. Saying about Allah, like we said before already. No, there's another way of learning Pshat in the Mishnah, and it's never been resolved. Dilmud means maybe she'im rotza lasses midaisa. Maybe we're still talking about the first chafin. There's only one chafin, only one time scooping. But maybe you don't have to use your hands. Maybe you can actually mold a keli the size of the kohen's hands, and kachi. This should be the measure. In other words, the keli should be equal to the measure of his hands, and then scoop it out with a keli. Or inami or shalayachas. Or maybe Mishnah means even just once, not a keli, but you shouldn't take any less or any more, exactly that amount. So you can't prove the Mishnah either way. So we haven't resolved it. Toshma coming here, it says clearly, Kate said, it says, so how should you do it? So this is now, how do we actually do it? Yeah. So yes, Kate so what happens is you take, remember you walked in, the right hand you have the shovel with all the coal, and the left hand you have the ladle with the potatoes. So you took the right hand, the coal and the shovel, and you put it on the ground, and now you're holding onto the ladle. You're holding onto the ladle with the tip of your fingers over you're holding onto the handle. Remember, you have to be able to turn over the ladle into your two hands, which are close together, scoop together, and turn it over in your control, and you shouldn't lose anything. Nothing should fall out of your hands. So how will you do that? So you're holding onto the handle of the ladle with the tip of your fingers, or with your teeth, and what you do is you're facing it towards yourself. You have both of your hands really tight together while you're pushing it forward to yourself. And you're pushing it forward, the ladle with your thumbs, until it comes to your elbow. Now you're holding your elbows together, not just your hands. You put both of your hands together all the way up to your elbow, and you're holding it as tight as possible together. And you're pushing the ladle so you get stuck between your elbows. And then once the handle of the ladle is positioned right between your elbows and your hands are together, you slowly turn the ladle over. You turn the ladle over, and you pile it up. you turn it over. So that's how you make sure that your both hands are together and you're in total control of the ladle, and you turn it over into your hands. And vitzoibra, you do it one shot quickly, you pile it up. And the reason why you do it quickly is kidei shehei ashena shoyolove. When you put a lot of titus, it takes a while before. And so when you put it onto the fire, and from your hands, you take both hands full of titus, and you turn it over on top of the coal, and you put it in one big pile quickly. And what's the idea of putting it in a big pile? We want it so that it'll take a while for the fire to burn through it. And we don't want the smoke to come up straight in his face. We wanted the smoke to take the time to rise. However, I'm just the opposite. Mefazra, you start letting it go, the titus going onto the coal, but like a thin layer, then you put another thin layer. You do want the smoke to come as quickly as possible. You want it to be usher, and there should be smoke there. And Vizuhi avoida kosher migdash, and this was considered a very difficult avoida in the Beis Hamikdash. It's a very difficult Beis Hamikdash. And Vizuhi, and Zuhi V'Sula we had a couple of days ago. This is the most, right now the more think this is the most difficult avoid in the Beis Hamikdash. This is the most difficult Vayika Malika. We learned what about Malika? Using your thumbnail to break the back of the bird. That is extremely difficult, especially according to those shittas that you have to hold the bird with your right hand, hold it on the wings and the legs, and at the same time use your thumbnail to go ahead and break the back of the neck. That's almost impossible. And that's a very difficult. And also, what about the kimitza? We learn how difficult kimitza is, especially when the kimitza is, fried, a mincha, and then, you break it up to pieces, and then you have to scoop it with your fingers and the thumb and your pinky, and you're breaking it, and it should be exactly, your whole hand should be full, and you exactly smooth it out on top and the bottom, and nothing should break from the inside. That's very difficult. You're right. There were three difficult avodas of the Beis Hamikdash. There was the malika, the kimitza, and the chafina. But what does he clear from here? Shmamina chayfen v'chayze v'chayfen. So here we resolve it. Clearly, could we brought it to the ladle? He scooped it and they put it in the ladle, and then from the ladle, this whole activity here is telling us how he took it from the ladle and put it back in his hand, which clearly demonstrates that there had to be a second chafina. Shmamina is a good raya. Says the Gemara. We ask a question. Okay, so we didn't resolve that question. That whether if he died, what happens? Yet we haven't. If he died, does the second kohen go to continue or not? And we had a machlekes of Papa and Abhuna. If you learn now that we resolved that's chayfen v'chayze v'chayfen, you do twice chafinas. So the machlekes of Papa and Abhuna Meshua. So what do? According to that Papa, if you do two chafinas, then definitely it's all right. The second kohen, because he is doing this chalpachas mon chafina. According to Rabbi Yeshua, this is definitely not all right because it has to be exact measurement, and there's no way that the second Kohen Gadol's hands are exactly the same size as the first Kohen. If we forget it, he has to make his own chafina all over again. So depending if you're passing a papa or Rabbi Yeshua. Says the Gemara, we have a question. Shochad, what about he shechted his par of a mace and he died? So the question, the animal died. Now this goes back to what we spoke about before. The Chanina holds that he has to be alive by the par, not just by the blood. So when Macy died, the question is, can another kohen step in because the blood hasn't been taken yet, and he'll walk in with the blood to the base of Mikdash, so that's good enough. Or does he have to have the par itself? When the pasuk says he has, does it mean a living par or even the dam is good enough? As long as he has even the dam, it's good enough. We want the par, not the dam of the par. Mechina says that the par that he has to go with the par. So if the Kohen Gadol, for example, dies after the par, you have to start again because he has to have a par. And we'll see more later. It doesn't mean that physically walks in with the ox into the Kodesh Kedoshim. It means that he needs to have the par alive while to enable him to walk into the Kodesh Kedoshim. But Shloki says no. Par means even the dam of a par is called par because that's what keeps the par alive. And therefore, as long as the kohen, even though the kohen died after the par, but if another kohen steps in and he walks in with the dam of the par, he's walking in and he's fulfilling the pasuk. And we have the same machlekes in the later generation. Like Chanina, he holds it that the par itself has to be alive. And Rabbi Yitzchak says the par. Rabbi Chanaf, Ami has Chanaf and Yudah, Chanaf and Yudah, Shlach both hold. That it means even even the blood is good enough. So that's a question. So you're telling me when it says pad, it doesn't mean the pad itself, it means a dam. It keeps it alive. So by Korban Pesach, we learned that you have all these family members that have to nominate themselves to be part of the Pesach. But if they want, they can step aside. Until when can they step aside? So the Rizchad says, Nim, they get counted on the Pesach if you want to be included. Or a Moishkin Yedayim, if you want, they can walk away and go somewhere else. Till when can they choose to make a decision? Until they shechted the set. Once they shecht the sheep, it's too late. You're stuck with this particular family, and that's that. The question is, the imis, if you tell me when it says pat, it doesn't mean pat, it means the blood, or when it says set, according to you, it doesn't mean the sheep, it means the blood. So why can't you change your mind even after they shechted the sheep until they sprinkle the blood? They should have said that the person can change his mind, be nominated to walk away until they spray the blood. So there's different. It says in Pasuk, it says that if you don't have enough people from being with the seh, and then you can add your neighbors. What do you mean? So we teach means hey and ches are interchangeable. While the seh is still alive. So even though you're right, generally if it says a sheep or a bull, it can mean even after Yeshach until you sprinkle the blood, because the dam is also called a sheep. But by Pesach it's different because it says clearly mehayos miseh. Mosiv Mazut has a question. It says, when it comes to Petach HaMoed, when you want to redeem a firstborn donkey, technically you can use basically anything you want, but it has to be of equal value. Or you can use a seh, and a seh it doesn't have to be equal value, and you can have one seh to redeem a whole bunch of Petach HaMoed. So it says there. Ain't poidin you should not use to redeem a petach hamoed loy bagel, not by a calf because it's set. Loy bechaya, not by let's say a kosher chaya like a deer. Loy b'shchuta, not even a sheep if it's geshachten is no longer alive, it has to be alive. Loy b'treifa, or even a living animal, but it has a defect that means it won't live long. Loy b'klayim, even if it's two kosher animals, let's say a goat and a sheep, it still has to be purebred. And veloy, because remember, seh doesn't mean necessarily, a seh can mean either a goat or a sheep, and seh could be a generic term. But nevertheless, since they're two different species, therefore it's considered klayim, veloy bekoi, nor by an animal that was born from, let's say, a ram and a deer. Ela beseh, it has to be a sheep. It has to be a sheep. So we see clearly from here, it says veloy b'shchuta. Now, why can't, according to you, seh, it doesn't mean necessarily while it's alive. It can mean after dead, as long as he didn't sprinkle the blood yet. So why can't you use a geshacht and the seh if the blood is still inside? What's wrong? Says the Gemara, shiny husam. Again, the sheep that it says by Petach HaMoed is different. Why? The Yalif says seh Pesach, because it says seh, and we learn seh from Pesach. That's why Pesach, we said before, it has to be a living. And not once a geshachten. But otherwise, in other places, it could be even geshachten, still called a par. By Yom Kippur, it says par, it could even be geshachten, and you just bring the blood in. Says the Gemara, if you're telling me that by Petach HaMoed, we're equating it to Pesach, so let's equate it to all dinim. It has to be a male, it has to be flawless, and it has to be a year old. So when it comes to Petach HaMoed, why don't you say Avkan? Zochar, Tam, Ben Shani. She also have these three requirements. It has to be a male sheep, it has to be blemishless, unblemished, and it has to be a year old. It says a number of times in the pasuk when it said by Petach HaMoed, it says you should redeem it. It says a number of times tifta b'seh, and then it says loy sifdai, and okay. So therefore it says twice tifta. It becomes to expand the criteria to say you don't need it to be a year old. You don't care if it's blemished or not blemished. You don't care if it's a male or female. Why don't you just go one step further and say that even if it's geshachten, even if it's slaughtered, it's normally it says par, it could be geshachten as long as you didn't spray the blood yet. Same with the seh. Even a geshachten the seh should be kosher for Petach HaMoed. So you want to know, we need to exclude something. Im kain seh mahana. The fact that the Torah emphasizes the seh is coming to tell you that we equate it to Korban Pesach. In what way are we equating it? So we're going to dismiss the year-old and all that criteria, but we're going to compare it to when it comes to geshachten. Says the Gemara, now the other way around. Who says that a par means including blood. Asabami, who says, like Chanina, that it's only a living par. Let me ask a question. It says in the pasuk, Well, hoitzi by a paradum, it says hoitzi as kol apar. It says you should take out the entire. No, we're talking about here the Kohen Gadol and Kippur. He takes out the ox. It says he takes out the kol apar. That he takes out. Sorry, we're not talking about the Kohen Kippur. We're talking about a Kohen Gadol who has to bring a carbon for something that he did wrong, and so it says in the pasuk, "Hoiti is kol apar." You should take out the entire par to outside the camp. So we darshan sheyotzi as kuloi, that he should take out all of it. You take out the whole thing. So he takes out everything. So first of all, it says "Hoitzi is kol apar." You should take out the whole part. So we see, and we're talking about it was already geschachten. So what do we see from here? That even after shchita, it's called a par. Doesn't that prove that I'm right? That it's the blood. When it says par, even the blood is considered a par. Says the Gemara, no. Here's different. That doesn't mean take out the par. It means sheyotzi es kule, take out the remnants of the par. But it wouldn't be called just a par on its own. Once it's geschachten, said, or the Torah says elsewhere by Kippur, that he has to bring in the par. It has to be the living par. Over here, we're talking about after you shechted it already. So now we're taking it out to burn it. So it says kol apar means all the remnants. Okay, says the says the Gemara. That's another question. It says there's para chatos. So the parachatas, chatos. He takes the parachatas by Yom Kippur, and it's talking about it says you should take it out to burn it, and it says parachatas and seilachatas. See that even after geschachten, still called par. Omer Papa says no. If we're discussing the hide, or we're discussing basa, the flesh, or we're discussing perish, the dung, then altogether, definitely that's called par. It's part of the par. Keep pligi, the only argument between Chanina and his contemporaries, or Rabbi Amir after is pligi bedam, blood on its own. The only thing, for example, on Yom Kippur, the Kohen Gadol brings inside is the dam. How do we treat that? Mar sava dam ikra par. When the Torah says par, it's referring to the dam that you bring inside. Mar sava dam la ikra par. And the other one says when the Torah says par, you wouldn't call it, if it's only the blood, it's not really part of the animal itself. It's only the blood that's circulating the animal. It wouldn't be referred to as par, and therefore the Kohen Gadol dies after he shechted the par. The next Kohen has to bring a new par, because it says par. It makes more sense to say like Reish Lakish, or that the dam is also referred to as par. See what it says. The par ben bakar. It says in the pasuk, Aaron should enter the kodesh with a par. You can take it literally. He walks with a cow inside. Where he leads the animal with his horns into the kodesh. No blood, but obviously, what does he bring inside? He brings the blood to sprinkle. Throws like the kapaitis and the perechas and all that. So therefore, it's clear that par means a dam. A raya to the shlokah yichunach. The quarterly par. What about the others? What's Rabbi Ami going to do? And what's Rabbi Chanina going to do? They learn, of course, you don't have to bring the cow inside. So what does it mean in the pasuk when it says it means that he needs to have a par outside, alive, to enable him to walk into the kodesh. What enables Aaron to walk into the kodesh kedoshim? The par ben bakar lechatos. That as long as he has outside a par, he has to have a par, then he can walk in the kodesh kedoshim. So par means a par, not the dam. And according to them, if a kohen gadol passes away after the par, the new kohen has to bring a new par. And according to Rabbi Nafcha and Reish Lakish, if the kohen gadol passes away after he shechted the par, you don't have to bring a new par, because as long as he can bring the dam inside, that's good enough.
Can I ask?
Yeah,
so which par is there outside that's alive? Because he can only go in while he's carrying the blood.
It means if he died, no, it doesn't mean alive. It means that there was a par, right? There was a par, and that means that he was alive. That the par that he made is still the one I'm working with. If this Kohen Gadol died after shechita the par, the new Kohen Gadol walks in, he has no par. Where is his par? He never had a par. You had to have a par, enable him. You're right, but you had to have an enabler. And the enabler was not the dam that he's walking in right now. The enabler was that he did the activity he had to do with the par. The second Kohen takes over, doesn't have that enabler, doesn't have the par. He just has the blood, and that's no good. You needed, so that's what it is. It's an enabler. Not that the par right now is